Before we launch into this, everybody could benefit from just a brief primer on how does cricket work and a little bit of its influence on American sports.
Yeah, well, cricket basically is the father of baseball. I mean, they both, I suppose, both came out of a similar idea of cavemen throwing rocks at other cavemen and then biffing them with big sticks. But yeah, cricket was the sort of the game that developed first, and it's kind of like, the best way to explain it is it's like a 3D version of baseball. So baseball, the ball doesn't bounce when the pitcher throws it in, and you can only hit the ball kind of in front of you. Cricket, you can hit the ball anywhere, and the ball bounces when it comes down to the batter. In fact, in baseball, they used to call it a batsman, which is what we call it in cricket, and now we're starting to call it a batter because it turns out women actually also like cricket, but that's a whole different story. But essentially, it was a really interesting sport in that it was used as a tool of the empire as well. So England would go around the world, they would steal all of your resources, they would tell you to be more polite, and then they would say, would you like to play cricket? And it turned out that some of these countries who despised England in many different ways decided that they liked cricket, whereas football, which was, soccer, their other big sport in England, that kind of went off on its own and just did its own thing separate to England, and it got big separate, whereas cricket only got big in places where England was involved on a day-to-day basis. So Argentina, for instance, were quite big into cricket. And then when England stopped being involved in Argentina, it just disappeared as a sport. Ireland was quite similar. America was quite similar. The first international cricket game was between America and Canada. And then for the next, last 100 years or so, America's really struggled as they've gone off with their own sports. So at one stage, cricket was the biggest sport. I think the phrase megastar comes from cricket. If you've ever heard anyone talk about a sticky wicket, that comes from cricket. There are so many phrases in the English language that are used all around the world that come from the sport because it was the first international sport. I mean, we had players who played all around the world for money in the mid 1800s at a point where the modern Olympics hadn't even come back yet. So it's kind of a little bit like baseball, but in some levels, it's just a lot more nuanced than baseball. You can get hit in cricket and you don't get to go to the next base. You just have to face the next ball, which brings in a violent aspect that the baseball doesn't quite have. It also